to the cloud. Yeah, so we're here at the Reimagining Wealth touchdown. I don't know which one. Um, and we were just talking about last week our interesting discussion where TB announced his game of distributing tokens of appreciation within the group, and how disconcerting it was and interesting, the discussion. And
And
Vincent yesterday showed me his amazing rendition of like his mind and what it's like to be in his mind. It was so crazy. So he shows in this like 3D um
Utopia.
yeah, it's called, what is it? Topia?
Yeah, Utopia.
And I don't even know how to describe it. He's basically like showing um his interpretation of these different complex systems frameworks for viewing the world, and he's like transposed them upon each other so you can um, navigate through this map looking from the top down at the different where different systems have placed um, their like conceptions of what is what and what is where. And so you can compare them all at the same time and find how they relate to one another, and kind of navigate the system through the system that you are most familiar with. So if you're most familiar with the UN Sustainable Development Goals, you can see where those are in the map, and then what other people have put um, ha- like how they relate to these other systems. So it's like a not a compilation. It's like a how would you say, a composition compilation. How do you, when things are
I I call it a map, or like a multi-layered map almost. But yeah, I guess yeah, the fact that they're all like overlaid on top of each other. I don't know that.
yeah, there's a word for that, but I'm not uh, yeah. So Trove is like a tool for helping to uh, basically discover things. It's a tool for discoverability. And so Vincent is always really thinking deeply about ontology and the mental maps that people use to can make things into containers and where to put things. And so our talk yesterday was on how valuable it is to not to make up a new map, but to synthesize these existing maps that already exist and try to understand how people are conceptualizing it already. So that was super interesting.
What do you mean existing maps? Are there maps at all? What existing maps?
Yeah, Vincent, you wanna show it?
Um, let's see if I can show it on here. I like the idea of not creating new things and trying to kind of improve the quality of existing things in general. But I wonder if this is a thing that exists at all. Like anyone has maps of their thoughts. That's pretty cool. Yeah, I'm gonna see if I could pull it up. Give me a second. So while Vincent is working, the first time I was introduced to this concept was 2014 by this guy. He's Belgian and he used to live in Australia 6 months of every year. He had created his map of mind and it was on his website. So it was a really good tool. So one of the times we were talking, he just brought it up off his website on a tablet and then showed me what he's talking about. Like it was there. It was very easily communicated. And then I remember we talked about, let's say if you bump into someone, or in situations where two new people who are meeting each other for the first time, they need to very quickly jump to the topic, then they can kind of basically mix the a mind map, and then they would both know that, we both have this particular background in engineering and law. Now we know that what kind of common language we have, then we can actually start talking very effectively.
Right.
All right, I'm done. All right, back to you, Vincent.
Yeah, there was a similar thought process going into the creation of this. So the different buildings are basically different frameworks. So the blue buildings are, it's actually like a little model of the UN the UN building. And those represent the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So there's 17 of those, all kind of in like a circle around the map. And then what's interesting is that these different frameworks, some of them have a lot of overlap. Some of them have like the exact same topics, and others are completely missing certain sections. And so, for example, the green are the donut economics sectors. So that's a different framework for creating a more sustainable world with a ecological ceiling and a social floor. And so, for example, there's like energy in donut economics, and then there's affordable clean energy as a sustainable development goal. So those are right next to each other. And then if somebody were to tag something with affordable clean energy or sustainable development goal number, was it 14, then they would also find information that was tagged with the donut economic sector energy, since those things are in a close vicinity to each other. And yeah, so the other sort of frameworks, one of them is the Barbara Marx Hubbard 12 sectors, the wheel of co-creation. Those are the purple like domes. And so, like, for example, something that was really interesting was the the UN framework, as well as the drawdown framework and the donut economics frameworks. They're very kind of like technical, and they have some social components too, but none of them include any sort of design or like systems thinking. And so the one that it's really interesting, the wheel of co-creation, in the center of it is like whole systems design. And also in Catalyst, like we have our own categorization system where there's like 20 or so main categories, and so like one is design, and another one is systems design, and so those are kind of in the center, because how this map works is that the items that are basically, when you're creating a map, it's not a map if you can move something and it doesn't change the meaning of the map. And so there's an actual kind of scale to this. So as you go more to the outside edge of the map, it gets a bit more specific. And as you go towards the center, the topics get more interdisciplinary and get more kind of like mixed together. Right. So something like wholeness is like a category of like things coming together. Like arts is like a very broad term that can encompass things like education, media, and art. Collaboration encompasses like inequality, justice, networks, peace, activism. And then relations is kind of a way to categorize the sort of economy and also sustainability, because it's all about the relationships between the different pieces. And then technology. So there's a lot of different sectors about whether it's like infrastructure, tech, science. And yeah, the idea is basically making it very easy for people to use whatever system they prefer to tag information, and then being able to see how those things are related, and be able to like translate across the different sort of ontologies of different platforms which use different categorization systems, and also different cultures, people who might not give a shit about the UN sustainable development goals and have their own system of categorizing information. And so there's a lot of different frameworks, like even going through Google, like the last week I found a bunch of other ones. This is a design for the 22nd century. This framework is like a forecasting design possibilities. This is the permaculture framework. And it's interesting because all of these, like, for example, earth care, people care, fair share, it's actually exactly how I have it here with ethics, sustainability, and wellness. Like the three main sectors fit into each other perfectly. And so many of these frameworks like fit into each other because they're really just using different words to describe the same types of things. Like this is the permaculture design framework, which is like basically Maslow's hierarchy, which I have on the bottom here, except they have like um, kind of like collective actualization instead of self actualization, which I actually like better because this is kind of like a social design framework. And yeah, these are like the different, there's apparently like 12 sectors of like permaculture. So this is one of that again. 12 design principles from nature. So many of these kind of like intersect with each other. And I guess people have some different like preferences on which one to use, but it's almost like a branding decision. It's kind of like, hey, I like the brand of the UN, or I like the brand of co-creation, and so I'm going to use these categories. But then when we create technology systems that use different categories without thinking about how they connect, then it's kind of like we're working in silos.
I mean, it feels to me like this is just like a really fresh approach on interoperability. Because I might be off here, and tell me if I am, but it just seems like in the past, interoperability has always been like, okay, so we're just going to choose one of these systems or something and like impose this as the protocol for how we're going to view this. And your take seems to be like, okay, that's okay. People, all these groups have their own system. We're just going to implement the intelligence so that we can navigate through these systems and still know where we are. So they're still, they can still talk to one another, but you're not enforcing a protocol here.
Right. It's, yeah, not enforcing a protocol at the sort of social cultural level, because these are the protocols people are already using. And so how do we connect the existing protocols? And then also at the platform level, how do we, instead of like encouraging people to create more and more protocols, it's like, hey, here are some of the protocols others are using. If you use these, and
Yeah. Did we lose Vincent?
Maybe we wait for Vincent to.
oh, did you guys hear me? The last thing I said?
No.
Yeah, no, I think what I said was, yeah, exactly about at the social cultural level, not requiring people to like use some standard because they already have protocols they use. So just kind of plugging into those and figuring out how they connect. And then at the platform level, it's very clear that this is something that's useful for people who are building platforms, because they can kind of pick one protocol without worrying about it not being interoperable with other ones if there is a way to have it be kind of connected. I think the other reason for when it comes to ontology for using a certain set is reducing the cognitive load. So it's like, we can't really hold more than like 7 options without starting to feel like a little bit like a menu. at a restaurant, after 7 options, you start getting a bit overwhelmed.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you have like a tagging system and there's like 10,000 options, right? It's kind of impossible to like hold those all in your head.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's, like about 20 is like an okay number to have in like a drop down of like, hey, tag this with something. And obviously it's like much easier if everyone is tagging the same 20 things instead of like 20 times 20. And so picking one of these frameworks makes sense from like a practical level to like, hey, we're going to use the SDGs to categorize um our social network, which I've seen a few social networks that just use the SDGs. Yes, they're kind of incomplete, but it's because there's like they only want 17 choices. And so it's like, yeah, how do you I think the catalyst categories are trying to then find the almost like if this was a map, what would be where would the buildings be located if they were kind of equidistant between all the different categories and they weren't missing anything really big? Like, for example, the SDGs just miss like networks and like most of the stuff that has to do with spirituality and like wholeness.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Those are huge topics. Like if you use the SDGs and you can't, there's no option to categorize something that has to do with like how we're all connected. Well, that's kind of annoying. So yeah, that was kind of the purpose behind like creating like Catalyst has its own set of categories, which is basically just trying to say, okay, this is the one that kind of is trying to
You're
create
finding the common denominators of all. Is that right? Is that a good?
that's the hope. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Before we get to that, like I wanna just like explore the problem statement first before getting to that solution, because we may end up not needing to introduce yet another one, which I can kind of hear that you kind of hesitating, but it looks like that's the last option. That's an option that we have to do. Okay. It looks like these frameworks, they were introduced for a purpose, but now they're being used for a different purpose. So the frameworks are introduced to help me, is like a utility, like a tool to help me as a project manager or product owner, whatever, to explore my own project. It's like a personal tool. That's what these frameworks are good for. However, it looks like over time, like by me passing my project through these frameworks, what comes out of it, it becomes a way for me to communicate with the rest of the ecosystem. Like it becomes an interface for me to say, like the donut one, for example, like how do I fit in the donut economy or some other frameworks? I think that's where the problem starts happening, where these frameworks are being used for us as an interface between us in the ecosystem level, as opposed to being a personal tool. Do you agree with my assessment of the problem?
Yeah, I would add on to it a bit that the sustainable development goals, I think part of the purpose of them was to kind of, it was almost as a like a PR move to like create these very visual, very like we can throw this on a wall. Like it was almost like we need to like just know, like communicate to people that are just like the average person, like what the problems are that we need to focus on at like a very high level. And so like you see like conferences that have like the UN like giant blocks with the each like goal posted on them. And so it's a really good way to really like publicize the sort of problems and how they and then like to be able to like put people into groups by say like, okay, like what SDG are you working on? I feel like that was kind of one of the main goals of the SDGs, which is a bit different from the goal of, for example, the like drawdown topics, which like drawdown was more like science based and more like, hey, these are the, you know, the 8 main like categories, but we've only categorized them to make it a bit easier um to understand. And there's actually 40 main ways that you can draw down carbon, and these are the percentage value we've associated with each one of these solutions. And so like, you know, that's like a very numerical, very science driven approach to decarbonization. And it
The approach is
definitely,
different and the purpose is different too here in your
yeah,
example.
it is. It is. And it definitely doesn't care as much about the branding because their categories are not like as nicely thought out, right? Like it's like, you know, I can pull those up.
So how about this? Like this would be my approach as an information architect. Instead of like now, the users are the projects that need to communicate with each other, and also they're using these frameworks as tools. And there's a bunch of frameworks like products on the shelf, right? So what you're saying is that this is crazy because this project is using these 2 products and the other project is using the other 2 products, but maybe they have a lot of things in common. We can't see because they're using different frameworks. We need to be able to have a standardized way to be able to see both projects through the same lens. And that's what I understand you're doing, the problem you're raising. And your solution is to introduce a standard set of questions that by answering those questions, then projects can basically find out where they sit on this map, and also maybe they can see where they sit next to other projects as well, or different entities when they want to interact with each other. If there's a funding organization, they can like ask projects to fill in the form that you're introducing. This is my understanding of what you're proposing so far, and I would have a different approach. I would any project, I would say, like you can pick any of these products on the shelves, like any of these frameworks. Just fill in the framework as much as you can, and I would come up with an ontology. I hope I'm using this word correctly. Behind the scene, every framework would translate into a set of concepts that allow for all these frameworks to be interchangeable. Of course, some of them would basically, so if someone's filled in Maslow's hierarchy, it may have some correlation with donut economy framework. Does that make sense? I don't know if I'm making sense here. I would not expose the users to yet another set of terms and categories. I would let them choose the framework that they're most comfortable with or what they already have. And I would try to kind of deduce information out of that and generate other frameworks as much as possible. Some frameworks we may not be able to generate some frameworks, but for some we may be able to. So if you've got the donut for a project, maybe we can roughly guess what SDGs they're more related to. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I guess so I think the reason why I created I felt the need to create another one was, like I mentioned before, this kind of like information overload. So like one of the things that I could is like, okay, let's say you're cataloging a resource. You could have a drop down, which is like, you know, you scroll past all the 40 drawdown sectors, and then you scroll past the 12 like co-creation sectors, and then you scroll past the SDGs, and you could pick which set of topics you want to use. That is one way to do it. The interesting thing with that is that most people, especially people who don't know about I feel like, yes, I would prefer that method for the sort of like power users. And I think for most people on the planet, they don't know more than one of these or two of these. Maybe like Maslow's hierarchy, a good amount of people know. And then like the other ones, like even most of my friends, like I say, hey, you know that UN SDGs? And they're like, oh, what's that? And so learning another framework for those people is not as much as an issue. That framework just needs to be kind of the one that's like all encompassing as possible. And so for example, like media is in like 3 of these. And so by including a list of 120 topics where media is listed 3 times, it's kind of overwhelming. And so what I was trying to do is kind of like, okay, if you could, pick 20 or 24 topics that would encompass all the topics of all of these, how would you do it in a really smart way? And that way and here's the thing. So these are kind of like main categories, but they all have nested subcategories. So for example, the UN SDGs, there's 17, but then those goals all have like 20 sub goals, and there's like, 200 or 300 like individual goals. And so in the same way, any kind of grouping that you take, like if you say, give me the top 1, I would say it's systems design. If you said, give me the top 5, I would say, okay, like these are the top 5. And then the next kind of fractal scale is like 20 or so. And then the next fractal scale is like the top 100 topics. And so basically, if we're talking about like a knowledge graph, it depends on how zoomed in you are. If you like zoom in all the way into sustainability, there's like 100 topics related to sustainability and how you can subcategorize things. And so if you give people like a free response where they tag something with like anaerobic digesters, you want to be able to connect anaerobic digesters back to like recycling, which is connected to the main topic, sustainability. And so then you can still find information that was tagged with in a different language, so to say, because it's related, it's close enough. It is within the realm of sustainability. So if someone is looking for a sustainable project and you tagged it with anaerobic digesters, if anaerobic digesters are connected to sustainability, then you'll find it.
Okay, I got it. I also understood now that we're talking about 2 aspects of it, which is, I think, what we're talking about is compatible to each other. I understood now that you basically have come up with a data model for frameworks in general, right? So you can categorize. If I give you a new framework, you can basically put it in your like that table, right? You look for certain attributes, and then even if it has, you may be able to make your model more comprehensive, but you've got one model that basically is a general model for frameworks. I think that's quite powerful. I was thinking of like that layer, but you're talking about how do we use it. Now I understand. Someone's project, someone may not know about any of these frameworks. You just ask them a few questions about their project, and then maybe you relate that to, you use some of these frameworks to give them some hints about, is that right? Then you use that information, you put it in these frameworks, you find the relevant framework according to their answers, and maybe pre-populate that and bring it up to them. Is that how you see a potential use case of the tool you're talking about?
Yeah, exactly. So, and the same thing for like tagging is like tagging any data on Trove right now, the topics. So basically each one of these frameworks is like a topic set, and then each framework has, like the UN SDGs is a topic set, which then, so it's a topic itself, and then that topic has 17 topics connected to that topic set. So the set is both a item that people could point to. Like people could say like, my project is like about the SDGs in general, or they can say, oh, I want to use the SDGs as a way to categorize things, and I'm going to tag it with SDG number 17. And because SDG number 17 is connected to partnership, which is connected to like collaboration, then anyone who is looking for a project, and let's say they are looking for it with the keyword networking, and networking is connected to collaboration, then that project will show up. But it depends on the level of specificity, because Google says that they want to organize the world's information, but they're organizing it in a specific way for a specific goal. And I would argue that, like, not in a lot of contexts, when I type in like 3 words on Google, I don't want 10 million results. I want to be able to filter it down. Sometimes I want the high level and I want 10 million results, but most of the time I want like 100 results. And so having these different like scales, like I was saying, like, okay, what are the top 5 topics, the top 20 topics? If you like drill down into like
talking about a scope, we can call it a scope. You set the scope.
Exactly. So like, yeah. So the like, I guess the different scales of these topics would be like the main categories, then the different frameworks, and then the subtopics. And if you choose to filter by like a subtopic, something that's like really specific, then you would get less results, which would be more accurate.
Yeah. The more you talk, the more I find relevancy potentially, at least to be inspired by, with document with the XML and the definition document. So every framework would have its own definition. Just like one question. So you're not intending to abstract those frameworks away from users access and just like have another intermediary framework or system to interact with the user. You would connect the user to the relevant framework as they proceed. Is that right?
Yeah, and I mean, it depends on the situation, but I've been playing around with actually like letting users choose which ones they want to use.
Which one? You mean which framework?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, I'll tell you. I think I can give you like a use case, like, which is me. Okay, so for our circular economy project, we went through this training, and like we were like introduced to these new frameworks. Like one of them I had never seen, and that was really interesting, but it's also overwhelming. And it's just in the back burner. Me and my colleague in the project, we haven't got to go to that because it's a bit overwhelming. However, if what you're talking about was already a thing, probably that training could have been done differently. We would have been asked to fill in some basic questions, and instead of like that training giving us like talking about general things for 2 hours, they could just show us on those frameworks based on our initial answers. Say your project, it will be here on this framework. That like you're in phase 2 of this. According to this framework, your project is on phase 2. Does that make sense? Just initially, like pre-populating, to give us some ideas, because that's possible.
Right. So I think that's the kind of there's a whole realm of like the world that gets lost if you don't know certain people or certain groups or certain terms, right? Like I was like the example I used with Lauren yesterday was like someone's like, oh hey, yeah, I work in like, sustainability, and they're like, oh cool, like I work in like the regeneration space, and they're like, oh, like what's that? It's like,
yeah
hey guys, we're working for the same goal here, we just are using like different language. I mean, regeneration and sustainability are different, but
or they may go to a conference and they see regeneration and say, oh, that's not related to me, whereas it might have been like totally related, but they just don't recognize it necessarily.
Exactly. So it's like, go to the map and look at what the buildings are look at your neighbors and see like how close you are. Like, yeah, it's your own thing,
Interesting.
different house, but like you guys are right next to each other. You should probably talk.
Interesting.
When you are speaking, Vincent, I immediately go, so I've been thinking about the same things that you have, and in terms of these systems, like these kind of personality role systems, like, you have these like zodiac and tarot and orishas and these like, card systems of these types or deities or saints or like whatever. But they're like all these different systems around the world that have these different types, and it would be like amazing to be able to express, like, to and everyone is trained in one system, but to be able to see the world and be able to kind of like speak to someone through understand, like receiving the information and your language and your system of sense making, that would be awesome. Like, I've noticed there are some similarities between these different roles or types in each system. There's there are these overlaps, so seeing where those are and be like, oh, if you're like a Virgo, then like in this other system, these are your neighbors near you. That would be pretty cool, I think.
Yeah, like how would you how would you map the zodiac signs onto Myers-Briggs, for example?
Exactly. It just like, what kind of conversation would that lead to? Like, if you have people from different parts of the world who could see how their systems mapped onto other systems, and then be able to speak to people who are near to them on the whatever scale, and use your framework mapping system for these personality or role frameworks.
Yeah, and in the sort of like exploration phase of like looking for different frameworks, I found a lot of personal frameworks, and I felt that those I left a lot of, except for the Maslow's hierarchy, I kind of left a lot of them out because it felt like they were kind of should be a different map. So like the kind of the frameworks that I like selected, the filter was like, does this have to do with like society as a whole? Does this have to do with like different categories of information or like domains of knowledge or like areas of focus or expertise?
But I think you start to see, when I hear this, I think of the theme here is that like where knowledge is going, like the Google of the future is, how people always think, is this discoverability and this ability to keep your own framework, your own kind of like sense making mechanism, and use that to be able to navigate other systems, and having the technology so that it can communicate, it can translate between these systems, so you can intake the information in whatever way makes sense in your system, and you can be like, oh, I understand what that person is saying, or where they are, what they're trying to accomplish. But they don't need to, like, I don't need to learn an entire new set of frameworks or language in order to understand.
That's ideal. And it's an entirely different paradigm, like what you said, Vincent. The way Google does it, it tries to bring everyone on the same page. It's like a one objective, like information representation, and then you tap into that and you come out with what you need. They try to give it to you, similar to the way like their ranking works. They want to reviews, like they say this business is 4 out of 5. They just calculate it. It's not about what you want or what your context is necessarily. But whereas like what Lauren's saying, everyone would have their own information, and we would find ways to translate between I think it's literally like languages. Maybe I've worked out that Thai language is better, you know, for me to communicate with people around me, and then you speak, I don't know, Spanish, and then we have to work out ways. None of us need to necessarily leave our framework and come to the other framework, but if you have ways to translate those concepts. I think the better analogy would be a species. You know, each project operates in a certain context and domain, and some projects don't necessarily need to worry about a certain aspect of what they're doing, because maybe the context in which they're operating is, let's say, takes care of the fairness part of it. So they just need to focus on the technology part of it, let's say. So they're basically, that project is mainly been using certain frameworks, whereas the other project needs to take into account other parts of other aspects that makes that project, make some other frameworks more suitable for that project. So now the question is that these two projects, how would they interact with each other, or how a third party system would be able to see these two on the same plane and be able to kind of try to make connections between the two. Am I presenting the problem correctly?
Yeah.
Because yeah, okay, good.
The one thing did you say the word species? I wasn't sure.
Yeah. I did, yeah.
I used that as
yeah, sure. Like I'm trying to find the best analogy that matches our problem here, because really meta. So like right now there are different programs and projects, and the language they're using is basically they're using these frameworks basically to express themselves, right? So maybe there is a program that says, okay, we want to fund projects in all different 17 SDGs. Let's say that's the language they use, and now they try to see projects out there according to the SDG framework. That's the lens they put on, right? So whereas one of these projects, maybe they're operating in a situation where they don't need to worry about the social implication or social result. They're only doing the technology part. However, that technology can address one of these SDGs really well, as an example. So I use the example of a species because the species have also evolved in different environments, and they express themselves in different ways. One species may basically produce sound, the other species may basically see certain lights of a spectrum, and they may not necessarily be using the same modes of communication amongst each other, because they all evolved those ways of communicating that fits their own environment, right? So some projects basically find some frameworks basically emerge to allow projects to learn about themselves and kind of communicate with each other, but they all kind of, it looks like they all belong to certain environments, and right now there is no broad way to get a good picture of everything. And if a program wants to enable projects that can contribute to SDG, and that's the lens they put out there, they say, okay, so which SDG you're at? If you belong to one of these SDGs, like maybe apply. And when I say the species, is like this species communicates in this way using this framework, whereas the other project is like a different species. It doesn't communicate this way, whereas could be potentially related. You know, they could have a symbiotic relationship in this analogy. But at the moment, we won't be able to identify those possibilities because these frameworks are creating some sort of silos because their languages are not translatable to each other easily.
Yeah, it's almost like the
it also seems to me like you know, Google can start making some of these connections through their incredibly massive databases. And if we had these access to these massive databases, it'd be pretty awesome. We could do like so much with knowledge that they're not doing, because they're basically, you know, Google and Amazon have these systems that they use to make people buy more shit. But it seems like you are trying to do this from algorithms of you don't have access to these massive data sets. So how do you manually create this algorithm for doing that?
Yes, and the other thing, which is interesting to bring to the analogy of species, is how the world evolves and how a lot of these categorization systems don't, right? So like if the UN SDGs were developed in 2021, they would probably be different, because they're already 10 years old, their view of the world. Like you know, everyone's talking about crypto and decentralization. Like, why is that not on the map? Well, we already made the framework and we're not changing because that would be a branding nightmare. So I guess we're stuck with this old way of categorizing the world. Oh, well, it doesn't matter that we have like 10 new species that evolved. Like, we're not going to classify them. They don't exist in our world. And so that's the kind of other.
I think that's super important part of the picture, to have an adaptive framework.
So I think that's the thing that was the other reason for making like the catalyst categories, is like, these could change, these could evolve, and I will be responsible for making sure that the data all links up, and that, like, you know, it's resistant to the kind of like different version control of the categorization. But I think there needs to be a framework that, like, you know, can evolve. And my vision is that is in a more like social way, where so the different, like, how I'm calling them networks, the different like networks on Trove are basically a group that is connected to one of these categories. So that could be like the UN SDGs, it could be design, it could be a drawdown topic, it could be like social entrepreneurship. And so you could join a network, and the network is sort of like a decentralized group that is based around an area of interest. And so on Facebook, if you go to Facebook groups and you type in like social entrepreneurs, New York, there are like 100 there's like 100 entrepreneurship groups in New York. I've like scrolled through and like joined like 20 of them, and they all post the same stuff. It's like a different group of 100 people sharing like similar types of things, like sharing events or saying, I need a co-founder. And I'm like, if you guys are all like in New York and you all are entrepreneurs, we don't need another New York entrepreneurs group if the goal is trying to like find other New York entrepreneurs to be co-founders. And so this idea of a network is like a category or like a topic of interest, like a location like New York, or like entrepreneurship. And you can have like intersectional networks that are like based off of the intersection of like two topics, or like a place and a topic. And then that would basically host all the information. Like, basically, if you
I like that. Event, you know, may I just add to that, because that's a very interesting one. There could be two entrepreneurs in, like, there is actually two in Melbourne, let's say, right? But I know what differentiates them, but they can't express it. What differentiates them is the governance, right? And you can start a new one. You say, well, I went to the existing one, Melbourne Plus Entrepreneur. The governance didn't necessarily enable certain things. I create a new one plus this alternative governance. But now I'm like, what you're talking about, it gives me a language to express what this is and how it is different. So people can come and say, okay, so Melbourne Entrepreneur, this one has this governance, this one has the other governance. Which one I find more powerful or more comfortable in? Then I join that one. But instead of like being confused, why are there two?
Right.
Or
right.
or even like being even more confused, like thinking, okay, because Melbourne and entrepreneur, this is the group, and then try to just be frustrated in that group. If you recognize, well, it can evolve. You can basically, like a species, it can fork, and can become a subspecies. It can happen. I think, yeah, if what you're doing, you're basically you're redefining frameworks. The first step you did, like by creating a model of it, but you're defining them in a way that they can evolve in the natural environment. So some of them can, evolve to survive. There could be gaps that allows new ones to emerge, and those that are basically not needed really, they can just go extinct.
So Vincent and I yesterday were also talking about vibe and how difficult that is to express. Like, so Vincent has this wall of opportunity where organizations can post what it is they're looking for. We're looking for a graphic designer for sustainability or whatever like that. And so I was looking at the wall of opportunity, and they're just like, it's like a bunch of words. I'm like, oh, there are just so many words. And I'm like trying to figure out how you would find an opportunity that really fit your flavor of group, that you have all these things, like you show up at a meeting or a group and you know immediately, like, is this the right group for me? You meet a person, like both of you, I met you, and immediately just the way you talk about weird shit like projects, I was like, wow, there's just something there that was, I was attracted to, and I thought, okay, this is like the way this person thinks is like different and interesting. But how do you categorize, how do you do anything systematically to
That's powerful. I can
document
imagine this.
vibe and express that in a network, because no one ever talks about that, but it's like fascinating to me. Like, these three different entrepreneurial groups in New York, maybe there's a reason that they exist. Maybe there is a different vibe between the three of them, and how do they self-express that different? It's not just like a topic vibe. It's not like just a different topic. It could be the same topic but just different energies. How do you express that? I don't know.
Yeah, this is, and I almost feel like, so I think there's two different but connected like issues here. One is like the differentiation between different groups. And in the case of like the New York entrepreneurs example, there's like hundreds of them. And a lot of those groups were created as just Facebook groups, just by one person who wanted to, like, I don't know what their intention was, but they wanted to just connect entrepreneurs in New York and then have them share opportunities or events. And so the other piece of it is like what goes inside the group. So like if you have a New York entrepreneurs group and you're posting an event in that group, is it meant to just get lost inside of that group? Or should it be posted with the New York Entrepreneurs Network, which anyone can join, and anyone who's in New York and who says they're an entrepreneur will find that event. They don't have to necessarily be in your like group of 100 people. And so it's like, we can allow for both the kind of like uniqueness of like different groups having their own governance and their own values and their own rules and roles. But those groups, if they are all working towards the same goals, when they share information or when they post information within that group, if it doesn't belong in that group only, if it's not information that is meant to just be like private to that group, how can they share it across the different groups without having to join 100 other groups and diluting their like community?
Now, this is a serious challenge. This is actually a serious challenge. And if you work out a way to smooth the flow of information in that way, because it's not about intention. It's very confusing. Like, I'll give you an example. In Melbourne, we have two groups that are basically the same people, but the groups are different. One is about, let's say, the technology part of open source. The other one is about the philosophy of open source. Okay, so there are situations where it applies to both groups, but there are situations where there's an event or a program that only applies to one of the groups, even though the people are exactly the same for the most part. So, and there's always confusion. Should we cross promote? Should we, like, if this group has an event, should we also promote in this event, in this group? But then it will be annoying, because members of the group would say, I'm already getting notification from the other group. You know what I mean? So it's very confusing. Does that make sense? So if there was something in a higher level that we could just set out, it has to be a setting that whether the organizer or the person who's joining just sets those things. And I wouldn't need to, then I shouldn't, as an organizer, shouldn't need to overthink it for every case. I would just put it in there, and decisions made based on the policy of our group and the personal policy that the person who's joined the group is set. They would either receive it or not. So it would really help. And it would help us kind of provide the most value, like, to our members as well, because I know about a lot of things that are happening, but I just don't post anything to the group because I'm not sure if this is something that they would like to know. You know what I mean? But if there was a way, like Vincent, you're describing, if you could come up with a way that helps me not think and just like put it out there, like an engine that just sorts it out for me, you know, I just put it in there. I just like see it as a third party. As an organizer, I just put whatever like I think is relevant in there, and people already have set up their pipes. So someone maybe is just like they want to say, okay, whatever this guy puts in there, I want to receive. The other ones are really selective. They only get what they've set. Or from this organization and the partner organizations. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I think we're on the same page. Like, and I don't post on like Facebook or social media much because I like have this like weird feeling that I'm spamming. And it's like, if I have something that's actually important that I want to share, I'm probably going to want to share it in like 20 groups. But then I'll be like, all right, what are the top 3 that I can share it in? Because I know people are in all those groups, and I don't want to be that guy that's just posting into all these individual groups. It's like, you guys chose to be separate. Why? And so, yeah, this concept of like a network that you can post in the network, and then groups can be part of the network, and you know what groups are in the network, and the network is based on your intention. It's based on like, I want this to go out to a lot of people and in this focused intention. And so whereas like a group is like, I want it to go into this smaller like group of people based off of my like social intention. But it's like sometimes like, yeah, there's like a job, for example. If you're looking for a job, you want as many options as possible. And maybe your job is probably gonna like be the best from like, there's like for example, like Dent or like Denizen is like it's like a Clubhouse group, which I feel like is like the closest group to like to me in terms on Clubhouse. Like it basically like anything that they talk about or anything that they post as an opportunity, I'm like, okay, yep, this is like something I'm interested in. Like the way that they filter out information just kind of fits me. But if I were to only look for jobs in that group, it might take me a while. And so I have to look elsewhere. And so it's like, there are different intentions and different like scales at which we should be like looking for information.
Yeah, not that it's possible to do, but if it was, if people could create like virtual groups, like if I define a group, instead of a group being created and I join it, if I could define a group virtually, say, okay, the group that I define, is a group that is about New York, about entrepreneurship, and about 3D printing, right? It's virtual. So this virtual group, what it does, it just sucks in all the information that are related. It's not a group, is not a good word for that. Then I'm subscribed to that. And any other person who's maybe defined a similar criteria, it also kind of, not only I receive information, but we also get kind of connected. Does that make sense? So basically,
it's like sourdough. It's like a sourdough starter.
What's that?
It's like a sourdough starter for groups. Like you can create a group. Okay, so when you make sourdough, you can't start from nothing, is the point. It's kind of like creating a group. Okay. Like if you create a group, online group, and you're the only one in it, and you invite 2 other people, like they're probably not going to until there's other people.
So what I'm doing here, the group is not a good word. I need a better word for that. But I'm kind of reversing the steps, right? Normally, the problem is that a group is created and then people have to join. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense. What I'm describing is when I create this virtual group, is subjective. But maybe 2 other people would create the same subjective group for themselves. But because there's a good match, it becomes an intersubjective. All of a sudden, I'm part of 3 groups. So this way, groups emerge instead of groups being like needed to be there for things to form. If we could create a dynamic like this, and also if we can, this way, maybe group is not a good word for that again, but whatever word we use, if those things don't require very like boundaries, they're more about, I see them instead of like islands that have boundaries, like mountains, that you don't really know where it ends, but you can actually look at it. It's very clear where roughly it is, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's like entirely different way of like visualizing information. So this way, like I can, instead of like, for example, a map, I can see from the above, I can say, okay, the 2-3 mountains there, the 2-3 days, that's clearly, let's say, New York entrepreneurs, but there's a smaller mountain next to them. That's New York entrepreneurs, I don't know, women in New York entrepreneurs, or 3D printers. But they're kind of roughly the same. There's no clear edges, but I can see the when they congregate.
Right. Yeah. So
if we enable this dynamic, those emerge, and then they would act like a landmark, and the new people can find their way more easily without needing to choose which group to join.
Yeah, I think the question is, what is the way to have those be governed? So like I have created, like I've like seeded a bunch of those types of like emergent decentralized groups, which no one owns. There's no like group admin except for like the system admin of Trove currently. And so that has been like a manual creation process right now. But in the future, like there could be a rule where it's like if more than 10 things are tagged with entrepreneurship, location New York, and then women, then it creates this new group automatically. How is that group governed? Are all the people that posted into that get invited to like be part of this new group? Or like like that's, I guess that's what I've been thinking about, and that's why I haven't really like actually started this yet, because I've been trying to think of like ways to prototype how those groups should be governed.
Okay, I think this is good. Firstly, now we identified a step before a group happens. We can see that like a group is a thing when it comes out of soil, but there is a process before that when it kind of grows into that point, which is like people expressing their interest and finding information. But then when it becomes a landmark, then it becomes interesting, right? There's power in there. Whoever who controls that, you can get a sponsorship, you put it on your resume, whatever, right? And then you claim that hill. And then you draw a line and say, this is our hill. This is, I don't know, Beverly Hills or whatever. And we are 5 people who are governing it. I think that's a transformation. It changes. It goes out of that fluid situation and it becomes a thing. I think, okay, if we defined, if you come up with a step in the process that anybody can propose for anything to become a group, right? And naturally depends on the influence they've had and the contribution they've had so far, or the authority that they've kind of been put out there so far, then they get buy-ins. And then there would be people who recognize, say, well, this guy's been like posting a lot past few months about this topic, and he wants to claim this territory, right? And that claim can come with a proposal. Say, hey guys, I want, we've been here, we know each other. I want to call this New York's entrepreneurs. That's what I want to call it. And I want to run it myself. I've been posting, I'll keep posting. This is, okay, so this is what it's called. Maybe it doesn't even need a name. It's like a Discord. You have a number that follows with the name that you just come up with the name. Say, this is my governance model. This is how I want to run it. And people can buy into that. Or someone else might come and say, hey guys, like we've been just talking about this thing for a while. It's just very organic, but let's actually give it a name, and we can have like an initial board of directors. Maybe we can open a bank account or something like that. And then people would buy into that.
Yeah.
And that is another framework system, the governance. There are a bunch of governance frameworks and decision-making frameworks.
Oh, yeah.
It is. It is, yeah. Yeah. I tried so hard. I think it's on the record. I did not use the word, but I say, yeah, that's exactly. I tried so hard not to say that. I tried so hard not to say governance and not to say DAOs. Yeah, but it is that.
Yeah. It's and what we're talking about kind of is in the like could be considered a DAO, right?
Yeah, it's maybe what we talked about is.
Why do you have that funny smile on your face when you say that?
Like I'm hesitant to
admit
it.
Same.
And partially because like this idea is something that I like have been thinking about before I knew about what DAOs are, and so I'm hesitant to like put it in the bucket of DAOs, you know. And also I feel like it's also delicate because communities are delicate, and I think right, this sort of like DAO is like removing trust in some ways that yeah, it's kind of like I don't know. I have there is some, I guess, hesitancy I have to call it a DAO.
Okay, this is similar to, let's say, like two people, like a bunch of friends, that boys and girls and everything, and then two become more intimate, and then maybe they call each other boyfriend, girlfriend, a bit more exclusive. But there is a point they say, okay, if we want to do it properly, we got to marry, right? And then there's a lot of problem with that from the probably male sees more problems than the woman sees. But but then there's also advantages of calling it a thing, right? Because then it allows you like to rely on that, and then for the woman can be really vested, and I don't know, then law also supports you in like inheritance and all sort of things. I think this is similar, right? Before it becomes a DAO, a bunch of people may find themselves like talking to each other and sharing information, and then there's a point that they say, well, look, you can just like keeping it casual, you know, like, oh, I'm in those groups as well, and that's fine, and it's New York entrepreneurs, all same family. But then we'd say, well, look, if we actually give it a name, we can get a sponsorship, we can, you know, we can do things. We can have a corporate entity, limited liability, we can do more. I think that's the step, and it doesn't always work, but there's always pros and cons, and people, if there are tools that people can take those steps, then they can make their own judgment and decide, and then some would fail, and then hopefully others would learn. Is that a good, like that's the transition? I think that's the hesitancy. Just like maybe we want to keep it casual, but there's power in just like putting some structure.
So here's the other question that's really difficult that I have.
Mm-hmm.
Can there be two New York entrepreneur whatever we're calling, like, let's say, right, can there be 2 New York entrepreneur DAO networks? Because the whole problem in the first place is that there's a million freaking groups and we want to create like, and so like, does for a group to be separate, does it have to have some separate flavor? Like it has to be like New York entrepreneurs, social entrepreneurs, or New York, like, does it have to be, it literally has to have something like in the name or in the kind of like the blueprint of it that's different. It's like, oh no, we're a 3-bedroom, like we're a 3-floor, you're a 4-floor, like we have less things or you have more things. Because I foresee there being an issue where people are like, oh, I don't want to work with Joe Schmo, who created who was the first one on Trove because he's Vincent's weird cousin, and he created the systems design group, and it's like he's a terrible moderator, and he's really bad at like curating information, and he just like posts stuff in there that doesn't belong, and I can't kick him out. And so maybe there needs to be like a reputation system that actually determines if someone can create, and maybe you can't even create a network until you have a certain reputation, but there needs to be a way to like, if we
why don't we leave it to naturally? Because if someone creates a group and no one joins, then no one joins. What is the issue?
Well,
what problem are you trying to solve?
Is it a group, or is it a emergent group that's based off of criteria where there can only be one of them? I guess my question is, the way that I've been thinking about the difference between a group and a network is you can create as many groups as you want. A group, you could basically say like, I don't like Joe, we're going to create a new group with like the same name. That's fine. I guess what I'm talking about is like, I'm calling it a network or like a commons, where it's like, it can't really be owned. It's like do you use Reddit, Alexar?
Not really.
So,
but I'll try to follow. I know /u/r, so that I know that.
So the Reddit groups are interesting because they're not really like in-person groups. They're like groups on like a category. It's like r/climate. But then there's like, it's like, who owns r/climate? Well, there's a bunch of moderators that moderate r/climate, and
how do they get to become moderators? Interesting.
Yeah.
Question. Yeah, I don't know. Do you like tell me? I'm curious.
Yeah, it's a combination of like, they started it because of like, I could go and I think I created r/systems design because no one created it yet.
Okay, I see.
But I'm doing a terrible job moderating it. And so basically, like, you can create a subreddit and then kind of claim that land, so to say. And then you can invite other people to be co-moderators, and also like the good moderators do it where like, if someone's contributing a lot, you then invite those people up to be moderators. So it's based off of merit. And it's either you created it, you took the initiative to create it and get people there and post stuff initially, or you basically.
I think, okay, perfect. I think I have an answer for like, or not an answer, like it became way more clear. You said one is a group, one is a network, right?
Yes.
People can safely associate with hashtags. Like I can say, I am #Melbourne, I am #startup, or I am #Melbourne, I am #open source. I can safely say that. But people are selective with associating with groups. Like I'm a member of that group because maybe they're not inclusive with women, I don't know, like disability or whatever. I don't want to associate with that group, or something like happens, you know? So, which is good. We need to have that. It's not a problem. It's just how we identify and we know who is what in the society, right? Or we orient. So you're trying to differentiate these two so that people can freely associate with a set of hashtags and find each other and discover information, share information freely without the fear of reputation or the issue of trust. At the same time, we need another concept as we have, like maybe too much of it, which is the groups. Which group you become a member of, you associate with, you trust, and things like that. So we need to create these. I think what you're sensing is that we already have the concept of group where you associate and there's a governance and there's trust working or not working. It's playing out. It's already there in all variations, meetups, Facebook groups, everywhere.
Yeah.
But we can't really we don't have this notion where you can associate as hashtags. And that doesn't enable you to necessarily get information. It looks like to access the information or to be able to share information, again, you have to go through groups. And then all those problems that we explored so far, the redundancy, the governance issue, the all sort of problems. So how can we enable the sharing, information sharing? I don't want to call it network. Can we call it hashtags? Hashtag worlds?
Do you want me to give
I'll tell you why.
list? Do you want me to give you the list of names that I've thought of for this that I cannot?
Yes, go.
Okay. Hold on. I'll do off the top of my head, but I have a longer list. Commons,
Okay.
like a common space.
Okay.
A network, a decentralized network, or like a den, DEN. I've thought about like a center, arena, a complex, and the complex goes within the realm of like the building architecture of like what I was showing before with the map, where like a complex is like a cluster of buildings, right? And then the other one was a tribe, and no, not tribe. A space. I think the hashtag, the reason why I don't like hashtag is because I feel like it's different than hashtag, although it is close. Lauren would maybe call it a hash bin. I don't know.
Okay. Now, well, hashverse. I'll tell you why hashverse. Okay. Because I want it to be whatever we end up with. This is what I personally like it to enable me to do. I want to be able to pair the use case, select a few hashtags, and that would become that we're trying to name. For example, I want to like apply for a PhD. I want to go to Berlin. I want to do hashtag PhD, hashtag Berlin, hashtag, I don't know, distributed technologies. These three hashtags, it creates the scope for me, right? So hashtag is the best tool I can use. That's not a tribe for me. That's not a network. That's no nothing. It's just like anything. It filters out all the information out there. It's a lens. And hashverse, hashtag is not the word that I want, but anything that enables me to bundle a set of hash bundles. I don't know, hashtag bundles.
The other thing that I like, it's also what I was kind of calling in some cases. So not the social aspect, but I was calling the sort of like aggregator of like if you said like, personally, I'm looking for events in New York related to sustainability, you can create a trove, and that trove would have those tags on it. And then any event that met those criteria would like show up inside of your like test in your home.
That's what I call a virtual group. Yes, I understand that. Yeah, that's when I was talking about virtual groups earlier. That anyone like, it was bad wording, but that's what I was trying to say. I understand that. Like an aggregator. Yeah.
So that was what I was calling a trove, the like aggregation of those things, but I wasn't calling a trove like this is the, here, let me screen share real quick.
Because that's not something that you created and then you're governing it. It's just, that's populated by the system or by the environment.
So yeah, this is what I showed Lauren yesterday. So within that map of all the different like categories, you can click sustainability and then go into this building. So now you're inside of that building, and this building has all the aggregation of all the different types of data objects that are related to whatever that is. So if this is New York entrepreneurs, this would show me the wall of opportunities. And when I click here, it would open up all the opportunities, and it would automatically be filtered by the ones in New York and the ones about entrepreneurship.
Got it.
And then you have like
Okay.
the event board. And so if someone doesn't need to be in this group or even know about it, they just need to add an event, tag it with New York location and entrepreneurship, and then it shows up in here.
Yeah, so it could even like scrape the web and generate these. It just gives you an image of like, a way to navigate. I love that. And yeah. And the good thing is that, some there are websites who do this. They kind of aggregate information and display it, but then they allow you to claim it.
Yes.
So then you can earn money from that. Like this can be yet another like metaverse coin that are like very popular these days. That it's just there. Your group will be there, but if you wanna like have some sort of control over what kind of information you present on the group, then you claim it, and then you have to have the coin for that metaverse. But yeah, I understand. I think I'm explaining this so that you see that I understood.
Cool.
What you're saying. That's interesting. That's way more detailed than a set of hashtags. There are concepts of the world where it's generated with your input. So you present it with a form, you put some information, and then you enter that world. It's generated at that moment. But it feels like the world was there, you just like entered it. Like the way I'm imagining, it's like a castle, and you don't see what's in the castle, and there's a warden and asks you questions like, what are you here for? You would say New York entrepreneur, or who are you, or something like that. And then they let you in, but then that castle is shaped based on the answer you gave.
Yeah, like the room of requirement in Harry Potter.
Yeah, and there might actually be some other people in there. The room of requirements. I have to revisit that. Yeah, it's been a while.
It's a magical version of the same thing. Like you would like open the door, and then whatever you need is in there. The room would change depending on what you need.
Oh yeah, I like that. And hey, maybe like I said, like New York entrepreneur open source, and the other people who say the exact same word, like I see them actually next to me, right? Before we enter. But the other words, we have two things in common. I see them like separate, like they're coming from other gates. So I know roughly kind of where everyone's at. I put it in the comment. If we model this in graphs, it's literally called distance. We can actually measure distance and apply that mathematically very easily. And yeah, it helps us kind of navigate. It's good. And when you meet someone else in that space, you can basically shake hands, or like you match, and you know what kind of commonalities you have. Or you can basically have even a brainstorming session. You create your own brainstorming session, and some other people you find it there with you that are happy to talk about that topic.
Yeah.
Now we're talking about Hashbin, like in a different way. Lauren.
And Vincent and I were also talking about the problem when you don't know what you're looking for, because that's a huge problem, a very common problem. And Google will find you what you're looking for if you know what you're looking for. If it's like a widget or this particular person who does this, you can use Google. But what if you just don't know? You don't know what you don't know.
5-6 years ago, we built a project, and after 2 years, the domain expired and we dropped it, and I don't even remember the name now. It was expert something. We addressed that issue with when you don't know how to express yourself, or you don't know what the problem actually is. You connect it to an expert and you talk, and that expert helps you understand what your problem is, and you find the keywords, and then you go to other mechanisms. Now like that's that thing in radio that I'm thinking, okay, thank you. Now I know how to ask this question or where to go. So this is, I need a chemical engineer. I didn't even know I need a chemical engineer. So we were trying to fix that issue with just like a very quick and effective way of connecting you to an expert. But yeah, I understand what you're saying. That is also a big challenge in the way of innovation, because you may sense, like I need to do this, or it would be great if there was something like that, but you can't even put it in word to search.
Yeah.
I remember I had this conversation with Kayla, who through something told me that there was this Sean guy who's working on this like impact framework. Like I should have known that before, but there was no technology, or the only way to have this raised up in my awareness was the long conversations with people, and they just happened to bring it up, and I'm like, oh, okay, but I should know about that. But I have no mechanism for like what do I, it's almost like there's so much information without knowing like what I actually want to accomplish in an overall sense. It's really hard to give me what I actually need to get there.
In a way, like our brain and thinking has already evolved like to process information in a similar way, but now because we're really overwhelmed, some extra tools can help that process, I think, because I'm building tools for myself, and I'm realizing that I'm rebuilding mechanisms that like our brain does already. Gets the information, kind of somehow categorizes, and when in the right time brings it up, but it doesn't necessarily happen, right? So I'm kind of building tools for myself to help with that process, to kind of get memory hooks for myself or reminders.
Yeah, I almost think
is that relatable?
Yeah, I think almost with Trove you can start doing manual processes of actually like getting people together to find out to figure out the algorithmic processes that you need. Like with Trove, it would be nice if there were an actual person there who I could talk to, and because the choices are so overwhelming, right? When I go in this kind of like castle-y thing, it's like, oh my god, I want to be in all of these places. Like they all seem good. Like and that's like the constant lament, and that's actually what your entire purpose is, to prevent this kind of overwhelm, Vincent.
Yeah, it's like a FOMO.
Yeah, so how do you kind of narrow the perspective by giving someone the thing where they're like, this is where your particular gifts and what you want to do with your gifts and what they need, this is going to be the highest opportunity for you.
Interesting.
Yeah, there's
I don't even really know the algorithm to do that in person.
There's like a big psychological component of like, we're addicted to information. Like people don't think about it that way, but we are addicted to information in the same way we're addicted to cheese or cocaine. Like it's like, you check Facebook because you're craving some new sort of a piece of information, and it's kind of unhealthy to like have too much. You start to like get desensitized, and you start to not actually be able,
because we need visual input all the time, for example. Like our brain needs that. If you take it away, it starts kind of making it up. Like what you're saying is that we now need the constant flow of information.
Yeah. And like, our attention spans are being impacted by the way that information technologies like feed us information, because now it's not enough to sit there and read a book. You need to scroll through a lists of books and then not actually like engage with them deeply. And so it's like, how do we like almost like dampen down the stimulation and like only connect people with like the things that they really want to connect with, and encourage a sort of like quality relationship with information instead of a quantity relationship. like Facebook is like a fire hose. Like I go on there and I just scroll through notifications and I'm like, okay, what's here? What's good? And then I click on it and I'm like, oh, cool. Let me save this for later and go to the next thing. I'm like, what the, like, that's like psychotic. But that's like literally what Facebook is like designed to train us to do. And by design, I don't mean intention. By design, I mean the purpose of a system is what that system produces. It's not about what you were trying to design. The fact of the matter is that the purpose of Facebook is what it ends up doing. And that's what it ends up doing to a lot of people. So that's the system. And so, yeah, we need to design systems that like intentionally are thought through enough that they can have other purposes, like helping us actually connect with what matters and not get overwhelmed and literally like drown in the stream of information.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to like have something help you find your purpose. Like in this picture of this, what should I call it? The round rotunda of stuff going on, activities. What should we call that?
The decentralized cathedral.
Yes. So in this cathedral, like, you know, I want to know like, what is my place?
Zoo.
Where? What?
It's a zoo. Sorry, yeah, go on. To me, it's
like
more chaotic.
Where am I going to be the most powerful? Am I going to be the bartender girl in the matchmaking bar? Like where will my abilities take me to generate the most like synergy or fulfilling role? Where, you know, I'm just reading this book by Cal, someone, you know, the one who wrote Deep Work or something like that, and he's talking about this fallacy of finding work by like, oh, the color of your parachute, like what's your passion? Follow your passion and your dreams, and you'll be happy because you're passionate about what you'll do. You'll be good at it and you'll find fulfillment. And he's like, that's not true. That's false. And it's leading people to like unhappiness. So his formula is to have a mindset, like a master maker mindset, where you get amazingly good at something that you are able to offer, and you're so good that they cannot ignore you, and that actually makes you passionate about what you do when you actually master it and get good at that. So that may be you know, something for Trove. Right now it's kind of like you're looking for opportunities, but like in a deeper sense, how do you find what you can offer that, you know, you are good at, and where you can make the most impact, and that's kind of what you're doing with a wall of opportunity. But there's something missing that I can't even like, it's not coming into words.
I think a good analogy would be, I can see this whole thing that you call cathedral like a big organization, right? That has people coming in, like new people, and it has an onboarding process. And I know based on personalities, some people need to be like led step by step. Some people like more autonomy. There's also different type of people come into this business, like the contractors who come in, they know exactly why they're there. You know, they go in there, they do their thing, and they come out. So
I know.
It's
the wall of opportunity is giving me tasks. And I want a role. I want it to be like a list of roles of how I could most help. And like one of these roles may be interviewing people and assessing what they actually need, or something like that, where you can first assess what someone can do for Trove in your Vincent, in this like decentralized dome cathedral. Like if I could, this is what I want to find out, not what is the task that are available to do in this whole big place. But which part am I kind of running, whether it's like big or it's like a little small thing, depending on time commitment or whatever. But what is my domain? What is my role? And not what is the task I could complete, I think.
There's a guy who's come up with this framework. I'm trying to find it, but it's a blueprint for cities to adopt. And in this blueprint, everyone needs to do at least 100 hours of work. It sounds a lot like communism, but it's not. I'm trying to find the word, but
I know what you're talking about. Is it called like the One World City?
Yes, that's it. That's the one. Yeah.
Cool.
So, like, not about that, but what Lauren, what you were saying, maybe it could be part of kind of the ritual or the initiation, or like maybe a regular thing that anybody every 2 weeks, like members, every 2 weeks they have to kind of do tasks. So firstly, it helps you do things that you don't have to be strategic about or decide or whatever. You just like say, and it still sense you're useful. And also it allows you to create tasks for other people, right? So you don't get overwhelmed yourself. Okay, so I need someone to find all organizations in Europe that are into this. So that like 1 or 2 hours, someone need to search and put a spreadsheet. So put it out there and someone else picks it up.
I'm sorry, I'm keep interrupting, but I like everything you say makes me think of things. So, so the way I've conceptualized this is to, and the reason why I did like a wedding table. So I'm a graphic designer. That's, you know, one thing that I offer. It'd be pretty cool if I could just go sit down at the story room table and have some colleagues, some cool people who I could meet with, and we can bust out some logos. Like someone could, like, you know, a client could come down at our office hours and come to our table, and we could, you know, whip these off. We could do like 3 of them in a day. You know, but that would give me some grounding in terms of I have some friends or colleagues who I work with, and we can set some standards for like, what do you need to do before coming to this table? Like, do you need to complete these 3 things before we work with you or something like that? But that way I have some grounding and fixture and friends and
I like that.
sense of, I don't know.
Yeah, you studied something, you feel useful, and you also learn about who's doing what, and then out of those random conversations, like you would know a good fit for yourself, like other things that you like. You would know who's doing what are other rooms in this space. But like, yeah, like doing the logo is something that you can just like go and start. I was imagining like there's a town hall and we're all a bunch of volunteers and we're like doing food packaging, right? I just go in there, I just find the fastest, easiest thing that I can contribute to. I get it started, but then as I speak to people, then I'll learn, okay, yeah, cool. So you know how to, I don't know, deal with computers. Like, hey, don't like come in here like this guy knows computers, and then you go somewhere else. But that happens naturally. We don't need to put the whole system in hold and interview people to find out this person knows with computers. And maybe I don't want to touch computers, so then I have the choice not to bring it up. I don't want to be the computer guy, you know. I want to be painting and doing other things. And then I have whereas if you put a form in front of me, I don't know the context. Should I say computer or shouldn't I? Maybe if I don't say computer, there's nothing else for me to do. Whereas with the process you're describing, it allows people to kind of like reveal or express as they see fit.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, this is what I've been thinking about with the kind of token piece of things, where it's like I've got a lot of questions of like, who decides who decides the ontology, or like who is like curating the list of skills, or like who is deciding what topics are important. I'm like, well, so I'm right now taking on the role of both the kind of like architect of the platform and also a user that is like deciding what skills to add. And so it's interesting, like how I've set up the system is instead of like being able to create roles from like the back end, I've given myself a role called admin, and then I am allowing myself as a user to use the app and create a new skill when I'm like filling out a form. And so it's like I'm like forcing myself to be a user instead of a engineer, because I want that role to eventually be easy enough that it can kind of be decentralized. So it's like I'm going through more work and giving myself more work in so that I could make it easy enough for other people to contribute. And so it's like right now there's a list of like 80 skills, right, that you can like select. And the idea is that you could like link those skills together. You can like delete them if they were like an error, or you can like there's like some manual work that needs to be done to like keep the information system like clean and like functional. And so like that, those are roles that you would want to reward people for doing. And that could be given out in a kind of, you know, decentralized way. Like, so I don't know if I'm following with that last comment.
Yeah, you said I'm the god, I'm architecting, but I didn't want to add content myself, so I allowed myself as a user to do that. Like,
okay, yeah, that makes sense.
So that others can learn and do the same thing.
This, well, you know what? I think I'm just gonna go with it and call it the cathedral then, in case.
Yeah, no, that all fits. You never know. These might be the baby steps of creating a simulation later. But no, this is good. Like, yeah, it looks like in terms of the governance, again, this was a governance thing that you said at the end. That is beautiful. What Lauren was saying, I think, or maybe I was kind of saying, I don't know, it's the fact that what I liked about this conversation was the fact, if we have a way that through which gets things done, I think that's really powerful. It makes the whole thing sustainable. And if we do a Gitcoin or some sort of coin, I think that makes it valuable, because it's a place where things happen, if that makes sense.
Right.
If, like what Lauren was saying, if there are tasks to do, you know, if I go there to Trove, instead of me needing to know my passion already and just like go to the right place for me, can be allowed to be a bit kind of random, just like, or be allowed not to know what to do and just contribute to something that's already there in form of a task. Does that make sense? It not only that it addresses the issue that we discussed earlier, that just like you can find your place, but also it gives energy. It's like batteries that you put into place in the machine.
Yeah.
Because it makes things happen. It makes it more attractive for people to come back to.
Right.
I don't know how else we're providing this. Maybe like no other place provides this either. Don't get me wrong, but if we do this, I think that's that's the great side effect of it. That someone like me may actually hang out on Trove much more, because then I would say, oh, this is where things happen. Like maybe I work here, if that makes sense. Maybe I put my tasks here and do some tasks. It's a bit like Time Bank or this barter systems, this exchange trading, local exchange trading systems, if you're familiar with them.
Yeah, like
that you do something. Like which one?
Another term I came across recently is open value networks.
Open value networks, interesting. Yeah, there's some local ones in the actual ground, so you can basically, if you can give massage, or I don't know, like tame horses or whatever, then you get coins or credit, and then you can, when you go to a different city, you stay there, or you get eggs or whatever, right? So those things have been around. Maybe if we have this mechanism where things happen in the network and Trove, then maybe I'll be more leaning to bring my work here. And then sometimes when I just want to zone out of my work, I just, okay, I just go to Trove, like spend 2 hours just doing things instead of going to YouTube. You know, because I just don't want to think. I just want to do things. Okay, so there's a Python script that they need to write a fetcher. I'm happy to play with that. You know, just like no obligation. You just spend time. If it works, that's good. And then also put my own tasks there, because I can see that it's helping me when I do other people's tasks. It encourages me to put my tasks, which creates this supply of tasks which the system would need.
Yeah. So you think the task would be both user generated, but also generated by the platform itself, right? So like it's kind of like there's like the maintenance of the building, and then there's also the conference rooms within the building have people that have tasks that need to be done.
If I would do what you described. I would that would be yet another group inside that is dedicated to the building Trove itself. So it's using Trove for that. And so if I can actually say, okay, so maybe I help the Trove, or maybe in the meeting you say, guys, like if we can do for the next few weeks, if we can like do the Trove task, that would be great. Something like that. It would create, or actually this is good because it creates some sort of infrastructure that we can run campaigns. For example, we know Lauren's doing a grant application, let's say, and in all groups we say, guys, like there's a series of tasks, so we can, we can promote tasks like organically in other groups. This allows for that. So like there's a bunch of tasks. Some of them there's no one to do because there's certain skills. If there's anyone there, that would be good if you go and pick it up. It allows with network weaving as well, Lauren. It's another mechanism for network weaving, because someone from an entirely different group may just be drawn to this, like to this room, your room, just to do some task. But when they come in to clean the room, they say, oh, that's interesting. These are like interesting. Oh, this guy is Jewish, for example, a lot of symbols, and that starts a conversation. So that allows for the connection to be made, whereas otherwise wouldn't have been made through conversations only. So sometimes like doing things connect people, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that Trove could be a cooler place if there were a higher level of maintenance other than you doing like all of the work, Vincent.
Yeah, I kind of feel like to kind of go with the architectural analogy, and I really need shades. I think.
And I need sun. Okay, cool.
What's that?
I wish we could swap. I need sun. It's midnight here.
So I have like 3 windows around me, which is great, but I think every hour I need to move my desk like 20 degrees because the sun's like in my eyes. So like how I've been thinking about the like architecture, like I think of this like architecture. So like I literally hold on. Like it's like kind of what I feel like I've been doing is like creating a map and like laying down the like blueprints or like the foundation lines. I'm like, okay, here's where this is going to go. This is where this is going to go. And like not necessarily like building the buildings, but like kind of planning it out, almost like if you were like planning out a city, like like what the different areas are going to be, so that way you don't kind of run into this problem where like you start building and you're like, oh shit, a subway was supposed to go through this building's foundation and now we have to like make it go like this. And so it's, yes, I want to be at the point where things can be built. And the other thing is like, until I think the other people that are initially going to be like, building up the buildings need to at least have like the blueprints in their hands so they can see what's going on. Because if I just like give someone a task and I'm like, hey, start building, and they don't get the like big picture, then they're going to start building it and they're going to like go outside of the bound, and then the subway is not going to work. And so like, that's kind of how I've been thinking about it from like an architectural perspective, is like, let's like lay the foundation of like how big this building site is going to be, and like what are the like building codes, and how are we going to work together to do this in a decentralized way, without like stepping on toes, and then start to like delegate that stuff. And so that's like I've been like, and that's the initial people who have been using Trove and testing it out have been like invaluable in that. But there's, I guess, that's why I've kind of waited to like really open the floodgates, so to say.
So long as you're not overwhelmed with the execution and amount of work to do, then it's fine. Are you fine with like are you okay with the rate of progress, or you feel like always crushed underneath the things you want to do? Because there doesn't seem to be any expectation from outside.
Yeah.
Or is there?
So I think what I'm most kind of like annoyed about is the I have a lot of really valuable content that isn't in Trove yet, because I didn't want to do the bulk import until the like I didn't want to call in the like the sand truck and the cement mixer and like bring all the like trucks in until I really feel like I had the blueprint set. Like I'm still changing the like the ontology and the database structures and like how things work. And so I didn't want to import things and then have to knock them down. And that's like a really weird thing. It's like, okay, do I bring everything in and then just like maybe have to demo it later, or do I wait until I feel like the blueprint is like closer to like?
You need to explain this to me. I thought Trove is a tool for helping people organize themselves. What does that have to do with any content?
Well, the content is like here. Let me. Another hour. Sorry. So basically, I have like a personal Airtable database where I have been cataloging like everything that I find online. And I have thousands of so like I have thousands of different like things that I've cataloged and then like categorized based off of this organization system. So for example, this is a filtered list where it's showing all of the mapping and visualization tools. So I have like 22 mapping and visualization tools. These have like different like descriptions, photos, tags. There's like fellowships. I have 51 fellowships, 165 climate organizations. And so basically like this stuff I want to all import in Trove, and I want to do it from the perspective of like the user, where I want to set it up that I can import this stuff into Trove, and then it's just as easy for someone else to do the same thing, where basically each one of these things gets added as like a resource, and then that resource can later be claimed by other people, and then it becomes collaborative. There's a lot of really difficult things there. It's like, how do you handle merging? How do you handle like rewarding tokens based off of like quality of information? But the idea being like, instead of me having this super valuable trove of information, why can't we collaboratively build a sort of commons of knowledge? And yet I want to have my own view of my information, be able to download it, be able to like remix it, but not have to like make anyone do all this work that I've already done all over again.
Question. How likely is it for the field types to change for those entity types?
I just wanted to, before answering that, I have to run in a minute. I'm going to be facilitating a meeting at noon. Alexa, you're welcome to join. Lauren, you too. It's the Flotilla Friday meeting. We talk about interoperability and basically like different platforms working together. I think, it's usually about like 5-6 people. I think we're going to be talking about privacy.
Lauren will explain to me what it is. Do you want to go there to be on time?
Sure.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I'll remember my question. I'll bring it up later.
Okay. Sounds good.
All right.
So yeah, I'm gonna run, but yeah, this was a really incredible conversation. Thank you guys. We'll talk more soon. And yeah,
I'm gonna make an appearance at Colonel.
Okay, awesome.
Okay.
Alexa, do you want me to send you a
Say
link?
hi.
Yeah, we're gonna stop recording right after you, and then I may join too. It's 4 a.m. where I am now, so I have to make some consideration. But I would love to join. Let's see what happens.
Okay, cool. It's on the Trove calendar. So
I got the link. Okay.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Talk to you soon.
Bye.
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 Okay, so I'll stop recording.